Hi, folks. Thank you so much for joining us for the first official session of the One Summit, also known as our keynote address. We're going to get started in just a minute or so, but in the meantime, we have a chat available. And we also have a Q&A enabled. So if you have any questions, concerns, please feel free to share them in the chat or the Q&A, and we hope to get to them during our session today. All right, Anthony, I'm going to turn off my camera and pass it off to you.
Thanks so much. So glad to see everybody here, and we see people are popping in. We see the participants numbers going up. We have 154 people, 55 with us right now. So we're thrilled about that, and we're just making sure that we're ready to go. I'm just looking just at a couple of things. If you see my eyes going down, make sure everybody's here. Yes. So actually, if you were on the last session, you heard a bit from me, and I promise you won't hear from me on this one. I would like to share that, again, we are thrilled to be here. Just a couple of things about the logistics for the day. I'll just talk for 1 minute about it, and then if you weren't in the last session or the kind of the start off session, we'll have talks on all of many of the textbooks that are a part of the One series. We'll be sharing information about OER and the One Nursing program in general. We will be recording all of the sessions, and we will get back to anybody who asks direct questions if we don't get to them. We'll do our best in every session, maybe not this one for the nature of the session, but for the book-specific sessions and things like that, we'll work in the chat and the Q&A to get back to folks during. If you don't see your question answered, trust, we do record all the questions, and we'll be following up either as a group or individually, depending on the nature of the question. And then I would just say one more thing. If you are having any trouble joining, or any colleagues that would like to join and are having any trouble, you can email info@openstax.org at any time. Registration is still open today, so anybody who you know that wants to join can go ahead. We have a lot of people with us right now. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to introduce Michelle Singh. Michelle has been an outstanding supporter of education in the whole country. Michelle is from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, but her impact and the THECB's impact, as you'll see from this conference, on the national and global education has been outstanding and is wonderful to be involved with. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. Well, let's go ahead and get things officially kicked off. Good morning once again, and welcome to the Open Nursing Education Summit. I am Michelle Singh, as Anthony mentioned, and I proudly serve as the founding Assistant Commissioner for the Division of Digital Learning at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And on behalf of the CB, along with our phenomenal partner, Openstax at Rice University, I am honored to officially kick off the One Summit. This is the One Summit, the culmination of efforts that began with a question 2 years ago. What can we do to help address the nursing shortage in Texas? While pondering a solution, significant events were occurring that impacted the nursing field. A global pandemic revealed the need for a different type of approach to healthcare practice. A new curriculum with updated requirements was introduced to the field. You know them as the nursing essentials, and an updated licensure exam launch, the NCLEX. The CB and Openstax have a long-time partnership in the open education space, and together, we realized that we could leverage the power of open to design a solution that would alleviate some of the financial pressure our students were facing in their academic journeys, but at the same time would be empowering a community of healthcare professionals to collaboratively design and develop a total of 8 textbooks, complete with instructional guides for the field. Supported by the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund in Texas, we embarked on the OER Nursing Essentials Project with the goal of designing textbooks to address the evolving demands of nursing education. Through discovery, planning, and implementation phases, the project has been shaped by constant stakeholder engagement and continuous conversation with field experts, paired with digitization by the best and the brightest in the business. This has led us here today. We have reached a milestone of pre-publication versions of the text to allow for greater input and review before the final versions are released. You are at the core of the content, the design, and the delivery. It is what sets this project apart, the intentional effort to involve those who are charged with leading nursing education. These textbooks were written by faculty for faculty and will be a freely available resource to any and all who would like to adopt or adapt the open content. The textbooks represent a significant cost savings for the over 22,000 nursing students in Texas, a savings of approximately $20 million a year. This number does not even begin to cover the reach of savings for affiliated healthcare majors, such as pre-med, pre-dental, emergency medical technicians, kinesiology, and the list goes on and on. This substantial savings allows our students to focus on their academic and workforce success instead of having to identify how to finance their textbooks. But aside from the monumental impact on college affordability, the one project united a community of over 500 of the brightest faculty, practitioners, and administrators in the business to design textbooks that were relevant for today, that were relevant to the work needed in healthcare practice. The textbooks represent numerous discussions held by thought leaders and subject matter experts with years of teaching and practical experience. But most importantly, what they do is capture the voice of faculty and students who are immersed in healthcare curriculum daily. Through constant communication, once again, and ongoing peer review, we were able to create a library of quality textbook resources that represent you and your field, and that are easily navigable and highly quality resources that take a look at the entire landscape of nursing education and the other factors that are continually impacting the work that you are faced with on a daily basis. Day one access sets our students on the right path to course and program completion. OER allows for this to be possible for everyone. The dynamic nature of the work allows for flexibility and adaptability and has the power of community behind it, where any and all can augment the core work as you begin to engage with the content. We encourage you to utilize this time with colleagues from all over the nation to strategize how you can optimize these resources in practice, how you can take these materials as a foundation to personalize your teaching and learning experiences in your own respective fields. And we encourage you to give back to this community by sharing your strategies, your instructional methodologies, and the developed content that will come from you engaging with this material. Share with your fellow faculty as it evolves and use the OER Texas platform, the Open Education Resource Digital Library in Texas, to help facilitate that sharing. We want to create a space that marks the start of a state, national, and global conversation on innovative pedagogical approaches based on foundational material identified by you as being essential to success in this field. We have created a centralized resource center or hub on OER Texas that will facilitate access to content, curated collections, and summit materials, and build community through group discussions. We want to thank the over 1,200 participants attending this event today and tomorrow, and will help foster open dialogue on instructional advancements that are responsive to the demands of the field. Thank you, thank you, and thank you for taking time out of your schedules, which we know are extremely stretched, to share your passion and expertise and to demonstrate your commitment to advancing higher education for all. We hope you will find the content over the next 2 days enriching and engaging, and that you will help jumpstart a global community of practice that will leave you reassured that this truly was the one summit you could not miss this year. To reach this milestone took the time and effort of many of you on this call, many of you that will be engaged in leading conversations over the next few days, and we are grateful for your contribution. Additionally, the one project could not have come to fruition without the leadership of our valued partner, Openstax. specifically Mr. Anthony Palmiato, Director of Higher Education, and Ms. Carrie Gitz, Director in the Digital Learning Division at the Coordinating Board. Their dedication and visionary thinking helped create world-class resources alongside so many of you. We are in your debt for being able to take a thought, an idea, and create this significant content set of resources that will impact today, tomorrow, and the future. A shout out as well to Ms. Lindsay Josephs at Openstax for spearheading this amazing event, and to the countless members of the Openstax and coordinating board teams who contributed to today's success. This was an amazing adventure, a worthwhile journey, and a true labor of love for so many. And our work is just getting started. So let the fun begin. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to launch the opening keynote session for the One Summit. I am honored to introduce Sarah Northam, Director of Research Instruction Services, and George Swindell, Program Coordinator in the College of Innovation at Texas A&M University-Commerce. Sarah is a proud librarian who strives to make a positive influence in the lives of students, faculty, and staff through her work as an information facilitator in the Velma K. Welchers Library. Sarah is a published author who is a self-proclaimed nerd. You're in great company today, Sarah, and has been instrumental in shaping the open education culture at A&M Commerce. George is a creative faculty member who combined his passion for teaching and gaming into innovative instructional delivery that influences many at his university. Both a studious professor, an enthusiastic gamer, and a big fan of Harry Potter, again, in very good company today, George has been able to channel his passion into innovative instructional programs that have made a lasting impact on countless students and faculty colleagues. Sarah and George will walk you through their open education journey and along with you explore different approaches to adopting and adapting OER resources and overall promote the open agenda. Please feel free to post questions in the chat or use the Q&A feature during the presentation to stay engaged with the content. And without further ado, Sarah and George, the floor is yours.
Thank you for a fantastic introduction. It's always fun to hear other people talk about you. We are very excited to be here today. George and I have had wonderful experiences working together and collaborating with OER, and we're really looking forward to sharing with you today.
So, to get us started, my name, as Michelle had said, George Swindell. I'm an instructor and program liaison at A&M Commerce. And Sarah and I have been working in the OER field for quite a while. I first got initially started when I was working in our CBE programs at A&M Commerce and just kind of started, moving away from the contract that we had with the publisher. And we wanted to kind of take that first step into kind of reducing costs, both on our side as well as on the student side. And so that was back in, Sarah, what was that, 2014, 2015?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I got involved in OER by accident because I got sent to a textbook affordability conference because I was the librarian who knew copyright. And to say that it blew my mind was amazing. I had never heard about the possibilities of what faculty were doing in regards to OER, and then just how equitable it was. So when I came back and found out that George and his team were starting to really look at converting courses to OER, let's just say it was a partnership made in heaven.
And since then, Sarah and I have been working, diligently together for years. So to get us started, Michelle did an excellent job with introducing, kind of the idea of adaptability and adoptability with OER. And so I kind of want to take that a step further. And I want to ask you a couple of rhetorical questions. However, please feel free to kind of chime in the chat with us. So to get us started, have you ever adopted a text and still had to supplement it with additional materials, whether that's additional, you had to create your own PowerPoints or you had to create your own exams, you had to implement additional worksheets or things like that? And then how many times have you looked at a text or looked at a book or were presented to materials and you were like, this is great, but I only need these sections, or I only need this chapter from this book, and I really need 2 chapters from that book. Have you ever adopted a book solely on the support or ancillary materials that are offered? I know back whenever I was in grad school, we always had publishers come in and give us great presentations on all the awesome support materials that they had. We usually got lunch at those meetings. And at the end, I always left wondering, are we going to adopt this book just because they're giving us this platform, or they're trying to introduce this new method to increase engagement? And I never really understood why we're making decisions based off of just the additional support materials, when those things, as instructors, we can kind of do our own if we need to. And then the biggest one that I think a lot of us can kind of harp on is, how many times have you, either back when you were a student or maybe even colleagues, require a book that is not used? Or my new favorite one, because it just happened to me, is having a book that's required and it being free, whether through library services or some other inclusive access kind of approach. And I wanted to pinpoint this last key one because the Florida Virtual Campus does, a bunch of awesome surveys and things. And in their most recent survey, one of their key findings was, although textbooks that are required and not used has dropped, it is still on average just over 2 textbooks for each person that they're going to have to purchase and inevitably not even use. And so with this, we start looking into, okay, we have a lot of problems. Michelle, again, amazing introduction, talking about the affordability and trying to increase access when it comes to materials, but also just across the board. And so one of the potential solutions that we want to, kind of take you through is OER, and kind of why it was founded, how it was founded, and all of these other aspects to try and incorporate how we can use these in our own curriculums. So before we move on to what exactly is OER, I want to ask one final little question, and that we're going to revisit later on, and that is, have you ever given an assessment or developed an assessment that is based on the materials and not based on the objectives of the course or the content? So think about that. And then let's start off with, Sarah, what is OER?
Oh, well, George, I'm so glad you asked. And I'm sure that a lot of us probably know the definition to OER, but to me, this is such a powerful thing. Open educational resources are teaching, learning, research resources that reside in the public domain, or have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. And the thing is that, so many people focus on the textbook component of OER. There's so many other things that fall under the umbrella of OER. There's test banks, there's video, there are archival materials. I'm a history nerd. I mean, we've already established I'm a nerd. There are literally hundreds of things that fall under the umbrella of OER that people can utilize to make their courses more effective, more approachable. OER really gives us the power to truly craft materials that are tailor-made for our course objectives. Since they are fully revisable and mixable, they can really be customized to fit the way that you want to teach your courses and how you want to present those materials in your course. OER allows you to piece together or adapt its existing OER to your specifications. You can create from the ground up. For example, let's say that you are maybe teaching a nursing class and using nursing OER, and you want to use local health statistics to make the lesson more meaningful for your students. We all live in communities where there are health situations that are unique to our community. OER gives you the ability to place those statistics in the context of whatever OER text that you're using. You can replace it with your preference. It also gives us the opportunity to diversify and make our teaching resources more inclusive. Let's take that same nursing text. Maybe again, you want it to be more reflective of your local community or your students, not just in statistics, but also in images, in scenarios, in treatment scenarios. OER gives you the possibility to do that. You can change out pictures or graphics to fit how you want to teach your class. You truly have the power to craft what you want to present to your students and what you want them to learn. Then, of course, there's the possibility of open pedagogy, which really is kind of cool. You can engage your students in the learning creation process, use their feedback, use their input, use their collaboration to improve your teaching and course materials. This is kind of like this beautiful cycle that you're continually assessing and improving your courses to make them better for the next round of students. OER allows us to create powerful and meaningful teaching moments, but it also gives our students the best advantage for learning. And what do I mean by that? So studies have shown that the use of OER makes learning more equitable, and that's something that's really important to those of us in education. Course materials are available to students from the very first class day. A study by Covard, Watson, and Park in 2019 showed that students enrolled in classes that used OER achieved higher grades than students enrolled in classes that did not use OER. They also analyzed the impact that using OER had on students from low socioeconomic backgrounds and underserved populations and found that it narrowed the gap in academic performance. Again, I want to emphasize that. Narrowed the gap in academic performance, and the decreased rate of D and F grades withdrawals from courses. And this is something that, okay, we as educators, we want education to be accessible. We want our students, but let's face it, our administrators care about retention, and they care about enrollment, and they care about completion rates. OER can contribute to all of those things. Studies have also shown that students consistently report textbook pricing to negatively impact their stress levels, their purchasing habits, academic performance, and again, time to graduation. And then finally, in 2019 study, Virginia Clinton and Shafiq Khan found that student withdrawal rates were lower for classes that used open textbooks than those that were used in classes with commercial textbooks. To me, this is getting to that heart of retention and completion. And then finally, OER really is about equitable access and leveling the playing field for our students.
Yeah, and kind of taking that a step further, the foundations of OER are built around these 5 R's, the right to retain it, to make it your own, to control copies of it. It is truly in public domain, as you had said, Sarah. The ability to reuse it, kind of use it in this class, use it in that class, use it on this platform, use it on this other platform, instead of like a lot of, licensing, that institutions do with their materials. And the 1C to create, yeah. So revising materials, and this is where the adaptability of OER really thrives. The right to revise, to be able to kind of make it your own, as Sarah was alluding to and mentioning, really making it personable, making it your own, making it applicable to your students and what your students need in that course or in that chapter. The ability to remix, again, kind of combine this piece with that piece, kind of like a puzzle piece, kind of going back to, that earlier question about, assessment. And again, we'll get to it later with curriculum, really focusing on what are the outcomes and how can we build up the materials to get our students to that mastery level. And then the ability to redistribute, share copies of it, whether it's the original content, your version, your remixes, however you need, and however you see fit. And so this is where a lot of misunderstandings come from. The difference between what is OER versus what's just a free resource that I found online. And so these 5 R's really do kind of get to the root of what it means to be open, and truly personable. And it's not just something that I can go online and Google and find. So now that we kind of have a little bit of an understanding of what OER is, Sarah, do you mind talking about some of the history before we get into the impact even more so of OER?
So this is my opportunity to truly geek out, as it's supposed. So the thing about the development of OER is it's truly longer reaching than people realize. The development of OER goes back to the 70s with the creation of the Open University of the United Kingdom. And you could almost argue that it even goes back as far as the 1920s with things like wireless university and correspondence courses. But the Open University is truly one of the biggest benchmarks. And Open University had a mission to be open to people, places, methods, and ideas. The goal of the Open University was to make education more available to those who could not do a traditional college experience because of various reasons, whether those be financial or the ability to commit to a full-time education. Again, the goal was to remove barriers that many faced when seeking higher education. Then later on, you see open source and freely available software emerging with things like GNU as a way to combat restrictions against computer programming practices. And again, it falls into making things more equitable. And then the idea was expanded with the development of FLOSS, or free Libre open source software. Then in the last 25 years, you've seen like the development of Spark as an advocacy group. You had this project out of Rice University called Connections. And then you see UNESCO coining OER as a concept, the development of Creative Commons licenses, which really have allowed OER to thrive. Then there's the creation of an open education conference, and then an international open education conference. And then let's not forget, again, this little thing called Openstax that published their first textbook in 2012. OER for me really seems to have exploded in the last 10 years. More importantly, you see many states passing legislation to encourage the use and development of OER. According to the Spark OER policy tracker, there are over 31 states that have passed some kind of OER policy legislation. And this varies from making course materials more transparent in cost to investigate new learning technologies to reduce cost or be open. And then finally to establishing funding for OER grants to encourage the use, the development, the adoption of OER. Intriguingly, Washington is the earliest adopter legislatively with the passage of HB 2300 in 2009 to investigate open licensing options for learning technology platforms. My state, Texas, has 4 bills related to course materials currently related to OER, or again, course transparency. And when you look at the overall timeline of OER, you really see these great strides in development that educators are really looking at to foster collaboration, to get to the heart of equitable access and really making their teaching work for them and their students. So then let's look at the impact of OER. And this is normally the point in an OER presentation where I would pull out that stat or a slide that talks about what students do instead of purchasing traditional textbooks or how it affects their grades and enrollment. But I found this yesterday and it really got to me. And so I thought, you know what, today I'm going to keep it somewhat positive. So this is a stat from from Bayview Analytics, and they have been tracking OER adoption practices since 2009 in the United States. And the 2023 survey had over 3,000 participants, and it found that OER use is growing yearly. The same survey noted that faculty awareness of OER is increasing yearly. So over 50% of the faculty surveyed in this most current survey indicated that they were aware or very aware of OER. To me, this is crazy because when George and I first started working on OER, I think we spent more time trying to tell people what OER was than we did actually trying to get people to adopt OER. And so there is a higher level of awareness for faculty surrounding OER than there really ever has been before in previous surveys. But then let's take a step back because we are here to look specifically at nursing and health-related materials. So if we go back to the Florida virtual survey, it states that students in medical-related fields, the most current one, that students in medical-related fields spend more on average than other students. The 2022 survey of 13,000 college students in Florida's public higher education institutions found that 43.3% of medical science students, 42.4% of health professions and related programs, and 38.7% of biological and biomedical science students spend more than $300 per semester. $300 per semester on course materials. Some of the comments that came from that survey from health students in Florida stated, when I was pursuing my RN degree, we had to purchase books and materials. At times, one class would require more than one book, study guides, materials. It was very expensive and a hardship to me. I had to check with the professor to find out what was absolutely necessary to purchase. Another student, I was almost not able to attend the nursing program because the first semester I was required to purchase the $1,800 package, as well as pay $1,600 for my classes, hundreds more for other supplies and online access, physicals, TB test, and over $100 for a background check and drug test. Some of these expenses, and when it comes to education, are unavoidable. Our health sciences students have to go through certain things in order to do that health science education. But what if we could alleviate the cost of their textbooks? I know on my campus that one of our nursing administrators recently said that they actually have a fund set aside to help students if they can. Something that I am very grateful for because I remember being that student that could not afford their textbooks. So if we look at that, if we look at why we're here for the next 2 days, this is also one of the reasons that the ONE program is such an important OER advancement for nursing faculty and students. Again, it is about equitable access to high-quality educational resources. This empowers our students to truly take advantage of higher education.
And so I've seen some chat going on about inclusive access and equitability and things like that. One thing, again, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. It might sound like that, and I apologize. But one thing that open educational resources really does is it really does make it free, and it doesn't just move around where the cost is. I do know that there are a lot of inclusive access and free access materials that are kind of tied into whether it's an additional fee in the course specific, or if it's tied into student fees and tuition costs and things like that. But when we're moving away from, free access, inclusive access, and really moving into the realm of OER, we really do kind of add to or really take away that student cost in any way, shape, or form. And so when it comes to how can we adapt and how can we adopt it into our own curriculum and why it's important, the first thing is that we can take a true backwards design approach. I've got this picture here of curriculum in various fonts and various pieces of paper, and that's because we know the end goal. We know the outcomes that we need our students to be able to do. And so now we're able to kind of piecemeal what is needed in order to get our students to that curriculum, to that mastery of the content, a true backwards design where we can develop and articulate what those objectives and outcomes are. And then we can build out those assessments. And then from those assessments, we can determine what content is needed. Kind of, leading in or leading back to my earlier kind of bonus question from the beginning of, have you ever developed an assessment based off of content instead of basing your content off of the assessment? And so with this backwards design, this allows real clear alignment in what are the outcomes, what are the objectives, what are the assessments, what levels of mastery are there, what content do I need to fill in those gaps. The next piece is, the ability to revise and remix. Again, if you come into an OER that you're like, this is an amazing resource, this is amazing content, I just want to change these few things to make it applicable to my course. Or there's these 8 brand new books, for the nursing programs, and I want this piece for this course, and then I want this piece to kind of accent that, and then I want this one to really enhance this one objective. You can do that with OER. It's a little bit more challenging when we start looking at inclusive access things. My next favorite thing to talk about is, kind of really accentuating what Sarah had just mentioned about, the ever expanding and blossoming plethora of OER that is out there. On a daily basis, there is more and more OER. I just actually got an email this morning from Openstax letting us know about the alignment between one of their chemistry books, I believe it was, and this new homework platform, I believe is what it was. And so every day there is something new out there. There's new information being shared. There's new content being created, kind of going back to the 5 R's and that 1 C. And so not only is it content, it's also the ancillary materials too. I know a lot of instructors, are really concerned with the use of OER because, well, they don't have all the support materials that, this traditional textbook and this traditional publisher have. But that's not entirely true. A lot of OER are getting those additional support things, or other instructors are creating them and providing them on different platforms. We'll give you a list of some platforms to, check out later on to see all of the support materials that are out there. I had noticed a question earlier in the chat regarding the quality, and I believe Anthony had mentioned, had responded back to it, but quality is there. This isn't necessarily something that you could find on a Wikipedia page, but if that's of concern of yours, then be that relative expert, take ownership of the OER and ensure its quality. I know we go through an iterative process with our faculty when we're adopting new text to ensure that it's meeting our standards of what we need from it. And if it doesn't meet it, then we move on to the next one. And so the next piece, and this is where we really want to challenge you. We want you to start small. If your concern is, the quality, or there's not enough materials, or, it doesn't quite meet all the expectations that I have of it, then start small. Introduce an additional assignment or an additional support material that you may find useful. And then from there, that's where you can start building upon it. I know whenever we first started our transition away from our publisher, I'm not going to mention, into the use of OER, we started with just a couple of classes. And we said, okay, how can we move this class from this publisher to OER? And we started with, here's this competency, let's start with that. How am I going to develop this competency to free access to OER and ensure that we still have that quality from before, but now we don't have the cost. Now students don't have that cost. And so what are your next steps? What can you do with all this information? It's such great information, right? Well, the next step is to start exploring. Start talking with your, librarians. Start talking to any tech. If you have instructional designers on your campus, start talking with them. Start exploring what OER options there are for your fields, for your courses. Talk to colleagues who are already using OER. I know a lot of us on the A&M Commerce campus are utilizing OER in some fashion. Not all of us are, but a good portion of us are. And so those would be your great resources to start. And then from there, potentially even start talking to your students, get feedback from them. I know we've talked about, the Florida Virtual Survey and things like that, but talk to your campus. See what struggles they're having. Do y'all have additional supports built in? If not, this is be a great opportunity for you to take the lead.
And I've seen a couple of comments in the chat asking about the stats that we've used and qualitative studies. And there's actually been quite a bit of research done in the last 5 to 10 years that's really trying to hone in on this benefit of OER. Of course, I've mentioned a couple of studies, but then you, like George has said, and I have said, we have the Florida Virtual Survey. And that's really looking at student perspectives pretty exclusively. But recently, you've also got states like, I believe Georgia is now doing a student survey. I think I saw one the other day. Was it Virginia? So a lot of other states are also starting to do student surveys where they're really assessing this landscape of what are students spending on course materials and how is that really impacting their learning. And I know that right here, we've kind of highlighted official OER repositories, so to speak. But remember that OER covers a lot of materials. So for example, most government websites are in the public domain. So that means that things like data.gov, that can be used for learning materials. Then you've got things like that they're not considered like under the Creative Commons license open, but they could potentially be in the public domain, like the Smithsonian, the Digital Public Library of America. A lot of TED Talks are, you're encouraged to use them in classes as long as you follow. So I know that we're talking pretty exclusively about the OER, but as George alluded to earlier, there's also those lovely free materials floating out there that you could use and they encourage you to use. And I would just really encourage people to get out and play and see what you're able to do with OER. Take advantage of training. To kind of give a plug, Michelle is with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. In Texas, they actually do several like OER academies every year that are really good, and you get to get in and you get to play with different resources. If you're a librarian on the call, the Open Education Network has an OER librarianship certificate. There's a Creative Commons certificate course that you can take. There's a copyright course. I've used all of these tools to kind of help me create a knowledge base where I can really get to the heart of helping my faculty and students find and use OER. So really take advantage of some of those things and see what's available out there if this is something you're really interested in. I could talk forever, so I'm gonna take a step back so George can jump in again.
I mean, Sarah, I think you've done wonders. And I think at this point, I really appreciate all of y'all's time, and I'm excited to share. We've had a couple of other questions about the availability of the PowerPoint presentation. Feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, I'm happy to share this with Anthony and the team, and they can send it out as needed.
And I see a really great question from Lindsay Boucher. I hope I pronounced that right, about how reliable text banks are and stuff. A lot of places are actually putting test banks behind a registration process. So for example, that's one of the things I really like about Openstax is they have instructor accounts that you have to, if you want to access some of those ancillary materials, you have to register for an instructor account. And there's a few other places that have done that. So you're correct in that depending on how the test bank is questioned, it could be openly available to students, but a lot of OER websites, so to speak, are trying to get around that by creating instructor inclusive content or exclusive contract. And I think I saw another question kind of along the same lines. Candy, George has already said he'll send the PowerPoint over so that can be included. And then if there's any questions, George and I are very happy to answer them. Resources, Kyla. I learned a great deal about OER. I'm not seeing, yes, thank you, Carrie. That was what I was trying to think of the title. The OER Core Elements class. George and I have both done that, and it was really incredibly rewarding. And there was also an accessibility one that was really good. Beth, yes. George, could you put our emails up again, please?
I've got them in there.
Okay.
Before we get too far ahead, I do want to circle back to that question regarding the test banks. And I think this is one of those pieces where, as an instructor, this is my responsibility, because, I teach online. The moment a student takes that test, I have to assume that those questions are out there in the ether. And so that's kind of where, having test banks and things like that are excellent, but as an instructor, I cannot rely on those. And so one of the biggest things that I'm a huge advocate for is, pushing towards the more authentic assessments. So just kind of take that, as you will. But I do personally believe that the onus is on the instructor to ensure that the test is authentic.
I see a really good comment from Rita in the chat about how faculty could rewrite history in their own image and slant student education to not include a variety of opinions other than their own. And I think that that's actually something that the possibility exists regardless of what type of resource that you're using. And I hate to say that because I have been a student for way too long. People joke about me being a professional student, but I have had that experience in classes before where you're using a book and you definitely, it can be slanted. So I think that that's something that we as educators all have to be aware of, because I mean, we all have, what is it? What not unconscious bias, is that what it's called? And I know that I myself, I'm constantly challenging myself about the way that I think. And sadly, we can't control what others do, but to me, it's like the outcome, the advantage for our students. That's really what we need to focus on, and hope that if they do have that experience in one class, in another class, they're going to get that professor that's like, no, unconscious bias, sorry. They're going to get that experience where they are shown this is not how it is. This is what the opportunity is. And I hope that helps, Rita, because I see exactly where you're coming from. Yes, definitely other ways to determine competency. Implicit bias. Thank you, Candy. I'm just like, I know that there's these terms. What are some of the authentic assessments you are using? George, I'm going to let you jump in on that one.
Ooh. So it really is dependent upon the content. So I know that in like my math class, I have them doing a buying a house project. I have them work through those different components, and then it's really based on what the outcome is. How am I assessing that out, or how do I want to assess that outcome? And so That's the math class. In the psych course, I have them doing a common myth paper to kind of look at, how are they achieving the goals of understanding research, being able to, construct an empirical argument. In some of our more applied major courses, some of those could look like anything from developing an organizational plan, developing a SWOT analysis, or creating a SWOT analysis, using that to provide recommendations for changes, things like that. It really is case dependent. I know I was a part of our nursing programs. Uh, uh, they were doing a section on oh, hallucinations and kind of mental or disorders, and the term of like I was an actor for them, but basically it was a live simulation. And so depending on what is needed, that kind of leads to what that authentic assessment could look like. I believe someone had mentioned in the chat, moving away from those multiple choice questions. Absolutely. An authentic assessment doesn't necessarily need to be something big. It could be a reflective assignment. It could be an open-ended question. Just kind of measuring those different levels of blooms, for lack of a better other term.
I'm seeing some comments in the chat about NCLEX and, the importance of the fact that students are using multiple choice questions when they go to take their board exams. And I'm going to put on my librarian hat for a minute and diverge from OER. Check with your library to see what types of resources they have available to help your students with test prep. There are a couple of databases that's all they do is help prepare students for standardized exams. And we have a couple of them in our available for our databases. And that is something that you could combine with some of your other instruction to help students kind of speak like, and I want to be conscious of where we are, so I'm not going to say the name of the database, so forgive me. But I know one of the databases that we have, it has test prep materials, including flashcards and quizzes and things like that. So, there's definitely materials that you can combine that with OER to kind of make your learning more effective. I like to tell my students that the resources in the library aren't free. You are already paying your student fees, and so take advantage of those resources. And that goes for you as faculty also. OER is amazing and wonderful, but also check in with your library to see what they have available, because your students are already paying library fees to use those materials. So why not combine them with OER to make your teaching materials more robust and see how that can be helpful. Yes, some of you are dropping those things in for me. But since a couple of them have been mentioned, I'll go ahead. So there's Board Vitals, there's Learning Express, there's also a database called Mometrics. These all have, and then there's, I don't know, that one doesn't have test prep material for nursing. I take that back. But there's several databases like that you can utilize for test prep materials. Mm-hmm.
And I think the key takeaway that we want to have is really that starting small. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything large. You could even think of it as, okay, this one piece, how can I implement an OER or create an OER and put it out there, not only for me, but for my colleagues. I know, internally at A&M Commerce, we have a lot of people who share things between, or within the departments. Put it out there. Start with a chapter or one single lesson plan. How can I implement something that's not already out there, or something that's specific to what we need? If you decide, I want to create an authentic assessment for, this, that, or the other, excellent, do that, and then share it, because that's how we get to where we are right now and where we need to be in the future, is through that sharing.
I see another really good comment from Rita, and I'm gonna address this because I realize we're getting close to time, and I think that I'm not sure if the hosts want to jump back in for a second. But Rita, that is something, updating materials is something that can be something to look for with OER. Some places like OER update extremely regularly. And then you do have some that don't. So that is something that when you're utilizing OER, you have to be cognizant of and make sure that you're checking things like, well, when were those last statistics used? When was this study done? But that's also where some of the power comes in with OER, because if you do find that it's outdated, you can update it. And then, of course, there are resources that update quarterly or every other month. It just varies by the type of resource and then who really the sponsoring agency is. And that's where something like Openstax or something like OER Commons comes in. They kind of can let you know when resources have been updated. People can post different versions. So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of assess for currency, if that makes sense. Oh, Melissa, definitely go out and look. There's so many possibilities. So many possibilities. I guess just thank you so much for having us today. And I hope that we have introduced something new or something that is not new, but you learned and you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. So we really appreciate your time today.
Yes, thank you all.
You're so very welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for everyone's time today. And thank you so much, Sarah and George, for this wonderful presentation. I love learning from folks who are just so passionate about OER and education. So it's been great learning from the both of you. To address some of the common questions that we got in the chat, so this session is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Openstax YouTube channel in the days following the event. So if there's anything that you missed or anything that you'd like to rewatch, or if you would like to share this wonderful presentation with your colleagues, you are more than able to. And I also want to thank Michelle for a wonderful introduction. What a positive, incredible way to start off the One Summit over the next few days. Our next session is going to be starting in just a few minutes. So I'm going to put the Zoom link to join that session in the chat. In this next session, we will be providing an overview of the One project, an overview of OER. So thank you, Amanda. Amanda's one of my wonderful colleagues at Openstax for putting that link in the chat, and we hope that you will all join us then. I'm going to stay on for another minute, and then I'm going to hop on to the next session that we have. So folks, if any last minute questions, feel free to just put those in the chat. And thank you so much again to Sarah, George, and Michelle for this wonderful start to the One Summit.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is that Andretti, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, is that OER can really provide that need to know rather than, oh, well, it's nice to know this.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I, try and, push on others is this necessary?
Yeah.
Do we need to know this information? Do the students need to know how to do XYZ, or would that just be nice to know?
Okay. Well, wonderful. Thank you all so much again. And we hope to see you at the next session that we're going to start now. Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day, y'all.
Thank y'all.